Hey everyone, welcome to the video. Let's go over my core plays for Week 19 or the Divisional round of the playoffs for the NFL season on Draftkings. But before we continue, as always, if you guys could just leave a like, and if you're new to the channel, please hit that subscribe button. Really helps me out. Really appreciate it. And also follow me on Twitter at Pennell16. And if you're interested in the spreadsheet I build every single week for the NFL season, although I know it's running out soon, links on the description below for my Patreon as well as my Discord chat, and also do NBA every single night as well. If you're interested in that, you can check it out. Links on the description below. Without further ado, let's get into this slate. And this is a really good slate. Every game's pretty good. I mean, you got the 49ers versus the Vikings. That's a pretty solid game. You got Tennessee versus Baltimore. You got Lamar Jackson, Derrick Henry. That's going to be a fun game to watch. Then you got the game of the week in KC versus Houston. It's got the highest over-under on the slate. Then you got Green Bay versus Seattle, which I think will be a pretty good NFL game to watch. So very excited for this slate, and there's a lot of good plays. So we're going to be breaking it down. We're going to be starting off with the quarterback position, and my favorite quarterback of the week is Patrick Mahomes here at 7,500. Absolutely love the spot for Mahomes at home versus Houston. And trust me, I do like Lamar, and I will talk about him in a little bit, but we get about a $1,000 discount here with Patrick Mahomes, and he also has a very high ceiling. The floor is not the same as Lamar Jackson because he doesn't have that rushing ability that he does, but we also know he's got insane upside through the air. We've seen it multiple times this season. Now, has he regressed a little bit from last year? Yeah, of course. I mean, everyone's going to regress off a 50 touchdown season, but he's still been very good this year. And yeah, I like him a lot. And the Chiefs have a 30.25 team total, which is the highest on the slate. We also have a 51 point over under, which is also the highest on the slate by about 5 points. So I think this is by far the best game to target. And Houston's pass D is absolutely horrendous. I think Mahomes can pick him apart with all the weapons he has. He has KELCE, Hill, Watkins, Damien Williams, and some other secondary options like Demarcus Robinson and McCole Hardman. I think they're just going to pick this defense apart. We saw Josh Allen have a pretty good game versus them last week. And they're 26th DVA versus the pass. They're allowing 23.2 points per game to quarterbacks, which is second most, only behind the Arizona Cardinals. And just on average, they give up about 280 yards and 2 touchdowns per game. And I think Patrick Mahomes can easily get 300 plus and 2 to 3 touchdowns, maybe 4 if we're lucky. And the Chiefs aren't going to let off the gas either. We saw last week how Houston was down by 16, and Watson worked his late game magic and came back. So I don't think the Chiefs want any funny business. So they're going to be looking to put up a bunch of points versus Houston. And Vegas would agree. They got him at 30 points, like I said, which is highest on the slate. And wouldn't surprise me if they got even more. And thankfully, this game is on Sunday. So if you want late game exposure, you can go with Patrick Mahomes. Because I personally just love getting late game exposure. I hate getting an early dud because it ruins your day, week, whatever. So Patrick Mahomes, he's my quarterback one on this slate. I like the discount you get off of Lamar Jackson. Do I expect him to score more points than Lamar Jackson? On average, no. But he doesn't have to. If he can stay within like 5 points of Lamar Jackson, he's fine with about a $1,000 discount. So Patrick Mahomes, like him a ton. Then my second favorite quarterback is Deshaun Watson at 6,700. And I promise I'm going to talk about Lamar Jackson soon, but I like Deshaun Watson as my QB2. And I just like Mahomes and Watson better as point per dollar options than Lamar. I think Lamar Jackson's more than likely going to score the most points, but you also get discounts with these guys, and they also have higher ceilings as well. And really, just as for Watson, I want exposure to this game any way I can get it, and it actually make a lot of sense to like Deshaun if we assume the Chiefs get a lead and the Texans are playing catch-up, because as I alluded to earlier, Watson is the garbage time fantasy point king. The guy loves playing comeback football and just tends to get the touchdowns, tends to run the ball a lot, like Deshaun Watson quite a bit here. And the matchup's not great versus KC, but they do have a really, as they do have a really respectable pass defense. They suck on the ground, but pass defense very good. They are 6th DVA versus the pass compared to 29th DVA versus the run. So you can really run on these guys, but I just don't think GameFlow is going to set up well for Carlos Hyde. So I just like Deshaun Watson here. I think he can do some damage on the ground as well. And for fantasy points given up per game, they're a little bit more middle of the pack. Chiefs are giving up 17.6 points per game. A little bit above average, but not absolutely like elite. And like Buffalo's only giving up like, I want to say like 14 points per game to quarterback. So KC's pretty mid-pack here. And, you know, Watson had a good game last week versus Buffalo, 20 for 25. Had a passing touchdown, also had 14 carries, 55 yards, and a rushing touchdown, 29 fantasy points. It's just the kind of upside Deshaun Watson gives us. And this rushing upside does give him a little bit of a safer floor and a higher ceiling. He's not going to run the ball a ton like Lamar Jackson on a weekly basis, but Deshaun Watson's going to have to do everything he can to keep Houston in this game. And one thing I will say just to end this for Deshaun Watson, he should get Will Fuller back, which historically Watson is a lot better with Will Fuller on the field because that guy can stretch the field. He's a burner, so I think a lot of things are lining up well for Deshaun Watson here to have a good game. 6,700. Do I prefer Mahomes? Yes, but if you have to drop down to Deshaun Watson, I think that's totally fine. GameFlow does set up well for him. He does have rushing upside as well. So Deshaun Watson, like him quite a bit. He would be my QB2. And the last quarterback we're going to talk about in the core play section is Lamar Jackson. I told you guys I was going to talk about him, but he's just so expensive. But he's worth it most weeks. He's 8,400, and to make myself feel better about playing Lamar, I should say, because I don't typically like to spend this much for a quarterback, I tell myself I'm just getting an extra running back slot in my lineup with passing upside. And I mean, the guy's just a straight video game character. He's that quarterback you make in Madden and give him 99 speed and just destroy opposing defenses with. That's what he seems like. Like in my franchise mode, I drafted Lamar. It's just so fun playing with him. He just runs around the field. You can't stop the guy, and that's what he does on a real life football field as well. It's not just video games. And I'm not saying he can't pass the ball either. He leads the league in passing touchdowns this season while having over 1,000 rushing yards. I mean, he's just a straight beast. He's the league MVP, more than likely. And as I always say, he starts the game with 2 passing touchdowns as a floor because of his rushing ability. He averages about 80 rushing yards per game on the ground, which, 80 rushing yards equals 8 points, which equals 2 passing touchdowns. No other quarterback offers you that kind of floor and ceiling. And there's really nothing bad I can say about Lamar here. I don't really care about the matchups. And I mean, if you just look at the game log this year, he's amazing. 33, 37, 20, 26. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but 36, 32, 33, 28. You guys get the idea. And he does not have to have a big game through the air. I mean, he can do it on the ground. I mean, so, look, he had 145 passing yards versus Buffalo and 105 passing yards versus San Francisco and only 169 yards versus the Rams. If any other quarterback does that in the NFL, they're going to suck, and it's going to be a terrible game for fantasy purposes, but it's just fine for Lamar because in those 3 games where he only had 100 passing yards, he had 36 points, 26 points, 20 points was a little rough, but still, I mean, if you're going to get 145 passing yards, still getting 20 points out of it, not too bad. But his rushing ability is absolutely insane. It would not surprise me if he got over 100 yards rushing again. Again, probably run the ball probably about 12 plus times here, probably get a rushing touchdown, probably get over 100 rushing yards. His floor is insanely safe. If you want to make him the staple of your lineups, I have absolutely no problem with that whatsoever. He's amazing. It's just really pricey, and I do prefer Patrick Mahomes or Deshaun Watson for a little bit cheaper. But Lamar Jackson, totally fine. They're about 10-point favorites at home, so I expect them to run the ball quite a bit. Mark Ingram's also banged up a little bit, so might lead to more Lamar Jackson carries and Gus Edwards, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But Lamar Jackson, if you got the salary, obviously a tremendous play, and that's going to be it for the quarterbacks I'm interested in. I know it's the top 3 extensive quarterbacks, but you're going to have to fit one of these 3 again, in my opinion. I know some people are probably talking about Rodgers versus Seattle, maybe Russell Wilson versus Green Bay, but honestly, I just think these 3 quarterbacks are head and shoulders above the rest, so that's what I prefer, and this is my core plays video, so I'm going to tell you the guys I like. If you guys like other people, that's totally fine. We can disagree, but this is my favorite plays on the slate. Now we'll head on to the running back position. And the first spend-up running back I want to talk about is Aaron Jones, who happens to be my favorite top dollar running back on this slate. So I know Jamal Williams will be back, but there's just no time to mess around in the playoffs. They got to get their best players the ball. And in the backfield, that's obviously going to be Aaron Jones. I think we see a heavy dosage of Davante Adams and Aaron Jones in this game if they want to win the game. And he's been great this season. He's having like a 2018 Kamara-like season where he's just scoring touchdown after touchdown. He's got 19 on the season. That's insane. And we've seen huge games from him so far this ceiling. I like the ceiling, and he has a safe floor as well, especially with his involvement in the passing game, getting a little bit over 4 targets per game. And, I mean, the guy's just shown insane ceiling games this season. 32, 34, 27, 44 versus KC. Then he had 52 versus Dallas. I mean, the guy's just a touchdown monster, 28 points versus Minnesota. I like him a lot here. I think he's a pretty safe play, and 7,400 is not a bad price tag for him as well. The Packers are 4-point favorites at home, and I love home favorite running backs, and I think this sets up really well for a good Aaron Jones game. And this is a really good matchup on the ground as well, as Seattle is 26th DVA versus the run, and they're giving up about 25.6 points per game to running backs. So Aaron Jones, my favorite spend-up running back of the week. I think he's a tremendous play. Now my second favorite spend-up is Derrick Henry here at 8,200. So I like Derrick Henry quite a bit, and I know I got a few comments on my first look video because I put Derrick Henry in the lineup and they were concerned about game flow not working in his favor as 10-point underdogs on the road. And I totally get it. I do. I mean, that does not set up well for a guy like Derrick Henry who doesn't really catch passes. But here's my reasoning for liking Derrick Henry. 1, he's a tank. 2, the Pats knew he was running the ball every single play, and they could not stop it. There was nothing they could do. You just couldn't tackle him. You couldn't stop him. He had good blocking, just could not stop the guy. They knew it was coming, and they just kept doing it over and over and over again. Had 34 carries, could not stop the guy. And 3, Baltimore is much more vulnerable on the ground. They're 19th DVA versus the run compared to 4th DVA versus the pass. And 4, most importantly, if I'm the coach of the Titans, I want the ball out of Lamar Jackson's hands as long as possible, and I want to give the Ravens as few possessions as possible. So what are you going to do? You're going to hand the ball to Derrick Henry every single play that you can and milk that clock from the start. If I'm the Titans, I want this game to go by quick. I want halftime. What time's the game start? 8:15. I want halftime by a little bit after 9 o'clock. I want to milk this clock out. That's what the Titans did versus New England. They just kept running the ball, milking that clock, keeping the ball out of Tom Brady's hands, which I guess really isn't that scary. But Lamar Jackson having the ball in his hands is a lot more scary than Tom Brady. So I want to run the ball with Derrick Henry, keep the ball out of Lamar Jackson's hand from the start of the game. And I think that's their key to winning. Now, do I think they're going to win the game? No, but I do think the Titans can hang in the game as long as Derrick Henry has success on the ground, which he pretty much has success on the ground every single week. So I don't see why he wouldn't. I think he gets close to 30 carries as long as the game flow's permitted. I mean, if they stay within a touchdown, I think he'll be fine. If they get down like 2 or 3 touchdowns, obviously we'll have to probably abandon the run game. But if you're playing Derrick Henry, you're hoping the game stays close. And we know the volume's going to be insane. He's had over 30 carries in the last 2 games. They're going to ride him to a victory. If they win, they're going to have to ride him to a victory is what I'm saying. I'm not saying they're going to win, but if they hope to win, they're going to have to just ram the ball down their throat. So Derrick Henry, that's my reasoning for liking him. I hope that makes sense. I totally get the concern about game flow. It could definitely be an issue. So maybe he's not a cash game play, but I do think he's a really strong GPP play if the Titans can keep this game close. So that's my reasoning. I hope that makes sense to you guys. I totally get the concern about game flow, though I do. Damien Williams, like him quite a bit at 6K. He actually might end up being the most popular running back because he has a nice price tag at 6K. I really do like him this week, and plus it's just Chiefs exposure. It's cheaper Chiefs exposure. It's not top dollar. Chiefs exposure, that's a tough word to say in a row. But not top dollar, so, I mean, it's okay. I mean, they did give him a price hike. He was in that 4K, 5K range for the most part of the season. 6K, a little bit expensive, and he did have a really good game versus the Chargers. Now, I will say his stat line is a little bit overblown from an 84-yard touchdown where the Chargers forgot to tackle him. I don't know. It just looked weird. They just didn't want to tackle him. Then on the second touchdown, he had a really nice broken tackle, so I'll give him that. But the first touchdown, they just didn't. I don't know what they did. They just didn't want to tackle him. Maybe they played him in DFS. I don't know. But Shady's going to be back, which, I mean, it's like a little bit of carries, but DEEBO's going to get the majority here, and I will more than likely, he's going to be more efficient with his carries and touches, and he'll also be the main pass-catching running back out of the backfield, so I do like his floor there. He had 7 targets in the last game, so he's going to be the main pass catcher here, and, I think there's a good chance he gets into the end zone, considering their 30-point implied team total. It's the playoffs. You got to get your best players the ball, which I'm not saying Damien Williams is great, but I do think he's better than LaShawn McCoy. And like I said in my first look video, it's not a bad correlation play to playing with Mahomes because of his pass catching abilities. Because, if I'm playing Deshaun Watson, I probably don't want to play him with Carlos Hyde. Now, I know Carlos Hyde did catch a touchdown last week, but that's not going to happen on most weeks. So, Damien Williams, good correlation with Patrick Mahomes because, he's got receiving touchdowns this year as well as last year, so I don't think it's a bad play. It's a really good matchup versus Houston. They're 22nd DVOA versus the run, allowing the 6th most points per game to running backs, and they're massive home favorites at 10-point favorites at home. So love D. Will here. I think he's a very, very strong play. I do think he gets into the end zone as well. Then I got one more running back. I should say Raheem Mostert's a fine play. I just don't really like committees. And if you're going to give me Damien, I guess Damien Williams on a little bit of a committee, but at least it's not a 3-headed committee like Raheem Mostert. But the guy's been awesome. I talked about it a little bit in my first look video, but this is my core plays video, and he's fine. He is fine, but I don't want to talk about every running back. Gus Edwards, if Mark Ingram happens to miss the game, he's day-to-day. I don't think he's going to miss the game, but if he does, you could look at Gus Edwards as a fantastic play at only 4,900. He'd be the bell cow running back, probably get 20-plus carries, and he's a good running back too, so I wouldn't hate the idea of using Gus Edwards if Mark Ingram happens to be out, but I would expect Mark Ingram to play. But my favorite cheap running back is going to be Duke Johnson here at 4,700 as of right now. That could change on Mark Ingram's status, but again, like I said, I assume he plays. But Duke Johnson, like him quite a bit here. He's just more of a cheap correlation play for all my Chiefs exposure. So if you're running a KC stack like Mahomes, Hill, KELCE, you got to run it back with someone on Houston, and you're probably not going to be able to fit DeAndre Hopkins. That's just kind of far-fetched in the salary department. So you got to run it back with a cheap option, and I think Duke Johnson's the way to go, in my opinion. As 10-point underdogs, it would make sense to think that Duke would do some damage here as the main pass-catching running back. I would assume Carlos Hyde would take a little bit of a back seat if they do fall behind. So Duke Johnson, I think he'd get an increased workload, and 9.8 points last week, 16.7 the week before that. Don't hate it. Don't expect much here, but if he catches a couple balls, maybe we get lucky, get into the end zone, maybe breaks off a long run. Not the worst play in the world, 4,700. Does make a good correlation play with your KC stack. So do like Duke Johnson a little bit. Now we'll move on to the wide receiver position. And my favorite wide receiver one this week is TYREEK Hill. I like all the Chiefs, so it would make sense for me to like MAHOMES, numero uno guy. So he comes in at 7,600. You also get a slight discount off Davante Adams. Now, does he feel as safe as Davante Adams? Not really, but he's relatively safe. He's going to get you double-digit points pretty much every single week, but his ceiling is unmatched on this slate. I mean, this guy he could get 50 points and no one would be surprised. It's TYREEK Hill. And this is just a smash spot for him here versus one of the league's worst pass defense. They rank 26th DVA versus the pass, and Hill does draw PFF's #1 wide receiver versus cornerback matchup of the week versus Garyon Conley. And you should also see a lot of Vernon Hargroves in the slot. He's the main slot corner, and TYREEK Hill actually does play about 40 65% of his snaps in the slot. So should see a lot of Vernon Hargroves, which would be amazing because that's even a better matchup than Garyon Conley, as he's the worst graded corner on this slate. So it's an absolute smash spot for Tyreek Hill here, and he's just too fast. You can't guard the guy. He's got MAHOMES throwing the ball, top 2 quarterback in the NFL. And he can break the slate with just a couple of bombs here, and it only takes one play to do so. So if you're fading Tyreek Hill, I mean, maybe he's kind of sucking for a little bit, but it only takes one 80-yard bomb to make him a slate winner. So Tyreek Hill, love him. I think he's an awesome play. I would play him over Davante Adams just because I like Mahomes so much. Might be a little bit of a hot take considering I know a lot of people like Davante Adams, but I just like Tyreek Hill so much on this slate. I would rather play Tyreek. Nothing wrong with Davante Adams, though. We know the volume's going to be safe every single week. One of the safest wide receivers in the NFL. 13 targets, 16, 13, 6 is a little low, but 10, 12, 10, 11, 15. You guys get the idea. He's a very safe play, and he's going to be against a pretty bad secondary in Seattle. I have absolutely no problems if you want to play Davante Adams over Tyreek Hill, but again, this is my core plays video, and I like all the Chiefs, so I think it would make more sense for me to like Tyreek Hill over Davante Adams. Matchup is great, so again, I have no problems with Davante Adams. You can pay up for either. I think you're pretty much have to fit in either Adams or Tyreek Hill in your lineups because I think everyone's going to do so, and I think one of them is going to have a good game, or I think both going to have good games. So I don't want to get exposure to one. They also don't break the bank. They're not like 9,300 like Michael Thomas was, so it's much easier to fit these guys in. But personally, I like Tyreek Hill up top quite a bit. And that's who I would be rolling with. Now we'll scroll down a little bit here to one of my favorite plays of the week, DEEBO Samuel at 5,200. I think I need some chapstick. I feel like my lips are going to break in half when I'm talking. But DEEBO Samuel, I absolutely love him this week, and he's my favorite mid-range wide receiver by a good margin. I know Sanders does exist, but DEEBO's the wide receiver 1 on this team. He's the best wide receiver on this team. He is better than Emmanuel Sanders, in my opinion. You know, Sanders is just getting old at this point. I mean, he's still a fine receiver, but DEEBO, I think he's going to be a really good NFL wide receiver. And he's been very solid recently, too. If we just take a stroll through the game log, he did have one rough game versus Atlanta, which makes no sense, but 27, 15, 4, and 15, 14, 13, 24, 22, 8, 13. The guy, since getting a full-time role, has been absolutely dominant. Are the targets absolutely insane like Davante Adams? No, but he's also only 5,200. And, you know, Jimmy Garoppolo is going to be looking to get him the ball. And I just like DEEBO Samuel quite a bit here. Love the matchup versus the Vikings, banged up secondary. They're giving up 39.8 points per game to wide receivers, which is 7th most in the NFL. And you should see a good deal of Xavier Rhodes in this game, which is actually a very good thing. I say this every time I talk about Xavier Rhodes, but it's just true. He's got a 46 grade on PFF, which is only behind Vernon Hargroves on this slate. So he's graded as the second worst corner on this slate. He's allowing the second most yards per route covered this season, and the second on this slate, I should say, and the second most fantasy points per route covered on this slate. And DEEBO also has PFF's number 2 wide receiver versus cornerback matchup of the week, only behind Tyreek Hill. So DEEBO Samuel, I think this is a smash play. It's at a very fair price. I was a little bit surprised when I saw the price tag. I thought he'd be about $6K. So I would definitely take advantage here coming off a great game versus Seattle. Love DEEBO Samuel. I'm going to be locking him in this week as far as I can see. So love DEEBO quite a bit. Then a little bit of a cheaper wide receiver. We got Marquise Brown here at 4,400. I do expect him to be pretty popular. And this is just a total price play because it's not like he's been great this year. But total price play, I do expect him to be pretty popular. And it's a pretty good matchup versus Tennessee. Wide receiver 1s do typically have some pretty big days versus Tennessee. They do struggle through the air. They're much better on the ground than they are through the air. Their 21st DVA versus the pass compared to 10th DVA versus the run. Now his volume, it's very low, so he's a very boomer bust guy. But he's got big playability, and at 4,400, it's okay. I mean, it's okay. 2 targets, 2 targets, 4 targets, 3 targets, 2 targets. Like I said, the volume's not going to be there. He does have 7 targets versus the Rams, but targets are a little rough. Earlier in the season, 13 and 9, and recently not too much. But at this price tag, good matchup versus Tennessee. It's the playoffs. He could pop off, and I do think he's going to be popular, so I think he's a really solid cash game play, and definitely probably a stronger GPP play, just considering of his boom or bust nature. So Marquise Brown definitely on my radar. I do expect him to be the most popular low-end wide receiver of the week. And then one more cheap guy. We have David Moore at 3,900. I think he was in my first look lineup video, but with Josh Gordon out, he's the wide receiver 3, and honestly, for this price, he has not been that bad recently the past 3 games. Now, hear me out. It's not great, but his price is low. 4 points, 5.7 points. He's on the field. It's not like he's barely getting on the field. At least he's on the field quite a bit, but a little bit. And I do expect Seattle to be playing from behind here, so maybe add in an extra target or 2 there for Moore. And he's going to see the softest coverage of all the receivers, considering Metcalf and Lockett are going to be much bigger threats to the defense. They're going to be looking to lock them up. Matchup isn't that great, but hey, it's salary relief play. We can't ask for too much. We kind of just got to hope for like 2 to 5 targets, catches a couple balls, maybe you get a lucky touchdown. David Moore, I think he's an okay play at 3,900. I do expect him to have some ownership as well, because I think I've seen some people talking him up, and I mean, we got to find some value somewhere, and I don't think David Moore is that bad of an option. So, favorite wide receivers, we got TYREEK Hill, DEEBO Samuel, Marquise Brown, and David Moore. Then onto the tight end position, there's two clear great tight ends here, so I guess we'll just talk about both. Both are excellent plays, two best tight ends in the NFL, almost said the NBA. But let's talk about Travis KELCE first. He comes in at 6,400. And love all the Chiefs here, so it would make more sense to want to play KELCE with MAHOMES rather than Kittle. And the touchdowns really haven't been there much this season for Travis KELCE, but he's still been great and safe all year. I mean, he's got 97 catches, over 1,200 yards, 6 touchdowns. The guy's been great all season. If you just look at the game log, he's had a couple of down games, but for the most part, he's been pretty good. And especially the 2 games before the last game, he had 21 points, 28, then 19, 14, 22, 20, 13, 16, 10, 9, 11, 15. You guys get the idea. He's been pretty much solid all season, and he's going to get a lot of targets. Him and, TYREEK Hill are obviously the 2 clear options for Patrick Mahomes, and I definitely want exposure to Travis KELCE. And pretty good matchup versus Houston. They give up the 12th most points per game to tight ends, so it's a little bit below average. And the individual tight end versus safety matchup, according to PFF, is pretty darn good here. Going up against DESHAUN Gibson, who allows 1.56 yards per route covered this season, which is most on this slate. He's also allowing 0.36 fantasy points per route covered, which is second most on this slate. He also allows a slate high 84% catch rate. So absolutely love KELCE here. He's getting over 8 targets per game. He's got a 24% target share, 25% market share, 53% weighted opportunity share, all top 3 of all tight ends. So Travis KELCE, it's pretty obvious, but yeah, he's a tremendous play if you want to pair him up with Patrick Mahomes. I think that's totally fine. Then George Kittle, I think you pretty much got to play one of these 2 guys. You just got to find a way to do it. They're going to be so high owned, and they're both great plays. But George Kittle, I actually think he might be the more talented of the 2 at this point. I don't know if is that a hot take these days? Do people think George Kittle is better than KELCE now? I mean, I kind of do. I think he looks a little bit more athletic. KELCE is obviously still amazing, but I just think George Kittle is like an absolute freak of nature when he's on the football field. He just does a little bit of everything. And he's a little bit less expensive than KELCE, too. And he's just so fun to watch. He's just so good. 28% target share, 60% weighted opportunity share, 26% market share. Pretty much leads all tight ends in all categories. And he's got an 80% catch rate on the season. And he's just absolutely elite. There's nothing bad you can say about George Kittle. Matchup versus Minnesota is just kind of mid-range, but I really don't care about matchups when it comes to George Kittle. I think he's a tremendous play. If you want to pivot off of Travis KELCE chalk, you can move to George Kittle chalk. I mean, they're both going to be chalk, so you're really not getting an edge either way. But if you have a slight lean towards Kittle over KELCE, go with Kittle. If you have a slight lean over KELCE over Kittle, go with KELCE. If you're playing a bunch of Chiefs, probably makes sense to play KELCE. So just kind of depends on your roster construction, but both are excellent plays, and I would definitely try to get at least one of the 2 in. Or if you want to play both and fade a top-end wide receiver, you could totally do that as well. Just different strategies. Just depends on your roster construction. Then we need one cheap tight end, and that's going to be Jimmy Graham for me at 3,300. I originally talked about Darren Fells, but I feel like, Darren Fells is fine. It's a good matchup versus KC, but I'm kind of leaning towards Jimmy Graham here at 3,300. I just think Will Fuller being back hurts Fells a little bit, but I still think you can get to the end zone, get a cheap touchdown. But Jimmy Graham, I'm sorry for even recommending this guy. I mean, I've called him dust so many times this season, but he's not that bad of a pump play, to be honest. He did see 7 targets last week, which was the most he's seen since week 9. And so it was nice to see a little bit of a target ceiling, and maybe that continues into the next game. We can only hope. But he gets an elite matchup versus Seattle. They're allowing 15.7 points per game to tight ends, which is second most in the NFL. Not expecting much here, but you might be able to get a cheap touchdown out of Jimmy Graham that you could call it a day at 3,300. Don't hate that idea as well. If you want to fade the 2 top end tight ends, you could punt with Jimmy Graham, get an extra wide receiver in, but I do think that's a risky strategy. If you want to go double tight end with like a KELCE and Graham, I think that's fine as well. That's pretty much going to be it for the skilled position players. That's really all I'm seeing. I mean, we can talk a little bit about defense. The Ravens, obviously, they're fine, but my favorite defense is the 49ers. They come in at 3K and actually grade out as the number 1 play on my sheet for the defense position, and I assume they're going to be the most expensive defense. They're going up against the team at home that has the lowest implied team total against, so it just makes a lot of sense to like the 49ers defense. Obviously, they got Richard Sherman, Bosa. I mean, they're obviously an elite defense. 49ers defense, I think, is a tremendous play. And Packers at home is not too bad at 2,800. But I'm pretty much gonna be locking in the 49ers. So I can tell you that right now. You could go with some of the home teams and the Ravens, the Chiefs. Don't mind that at all. Actually, the most expensive defenses are all the home teams, so you got to pay up a little bit for it. But I think that's fine. You could go with the Ravens. I don't hate it. Chiefs. So if I'm playing the Chiefs defense, I don't really. Well, I should say I don't want to play the Chiefs defense because I'd want this game to stay close and just hope that Patrick Mahomes has to keep firing away. So I'd probably try to lean away from the Chiefs defense. But 49ers defense, I think that's where the money's going to be made this week. So I'm pretty much just going to lock them in. They're at a fair price of $3K. I honestly think they should be the most expensive defense on this slate, but we'll take advantage of the low price on them. But anyway, guys, that's going to be it for this video. I hope it was helpful. If it was, remember to leave a like. If you're new to the channel, hit that subscribe button. Really helps me out. Really appreciate it. You can also follow me on Twitter at Pennell16. We'll be doing the lineup building video either tomorrow night or on Friday morning. Either way, just stay tuned out for that. And if you want to check out the first look lineup video, you can check that out as well. I posted that on Monday. And I wish you guys the best of luck.